In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit a very simple rose. This is a super simple project. I'm going to show you every step of the way. You can use this as an applique. You could put it on a hat. You could make a group of them. You can put a pipe cleaner on it and make a stem. And it's just a really simple way to add a little extra to any project. So let's get started. To knit a rose, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle to sew it together at the end. We're going to be using some worsted weight yarn and some 6mm straight knitting needles. Now you can really use any kind of yarn you want for this. I would just recommend looking at your yarn label and seeing what the recommended needle size is for your particular yarn, but you can kind of be flexible in this. Just know if you use a thicker yarn, your rose will be bigger. If you use a thinner yarn like sock yarn or something like that, your rose will be smaller. To begin, we're going to grab our yarn and one of our needles and we're going to cast on. Now to start, what we need to do for our first stitch is to put a slip knot on our needle, okay? So wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with one of your knitting needles, bring up that loop and tighten. I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better here. If you're not familiar with casting on, we're going to do the long tail cast on. So just make sure you have enough of a tail because we're going to cast on 5 stitches. So you won't need too much yarn. So if you're not familiar with the long tail cast on, what you'll do is you'll take your index finger and your thumb and you're going to go in underneath here and kind of grab it at the bottom with your pinky and open it up so it'll make like a diamond shape. Then you're going to take your needle and you're going to cast on, well, this one counted as our first stitch. So the rest of the stitches will come up under our thumb, around your index finger, and then through that thumb loop, and then kind of snug it up. So that's 2 stitches. We need a total of 5. So keep holding your yarn the same way, and you're going to go up under, around, and through. That's 3. Around the index finger, through the thumb loop. That's 4, around the thumb, through the index finger, and then through that thumb loop. That's 5, okay? So we have 5 stitches on our needle. Now we can grab our second needle, and what we're going to do is we're going to increase kind of rapidly, and what that will do is cause our shape to become a spiral that we need for our rose shape, okay? So what we need to do for that is to increase each stitch all the way across. We're going to use the knit front back stitch. If you go over to Sparkle and Splatter and look at the written pattern, that's abbreviated KFB, the knit front and back stitch. We're going to knit into the front and the back of the stitch to make 1 stitch into 2 stitches. And it's very easy. I'm going to go nice and slow and show you how to do it if you're not familiar. So what we want to do is we want to grab our needle, insert the needle as if you're just knitting a regular stitch. And you're going to grab your working yarn. Your working yarn is connected to your yarn ball over here. We're going to leave that tail alone for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap the yarn around the bottom needle, and then we're going to bring that needle through and back to the front. And instead of pushing it off like a regular knit stitch, we're going to take our needle and we're going to swing around to the back of the stitch, and we're going to insert the needle again, wrap the yarn around the needle, and then we're going to bring the needle through, catching that loop, and then push it off. And as you can see, we now have 2 stitches, okay? All right, I'm going to go through and do the rest of these nice and slow. We have 4 more to do. We'll do them together, okay? So insert your needle into the next stitch, wrap the yarn around the needle, bring the needle through, picking up that loop, but don't push it off yet. Bring the needle around to the back. You can turn your work if you need to, and insert into the back of the stitch as well. You might need to scoot that back a little bit. Wrap the yarn around the needle and then bring that needle from the front, or from the back to the front, excuse me, picking up that loop and pushing it off, okay? Let's do that again. Insert the needle, wrap the yarn around, bring that needle from the back to the front, catching that loop. Now swing around and also knit into the back of the stitch. Wrap the yarn around the needle, bring the needle from the back to the front, picking up that loop and pushing it off, okay? Do this 2 more times for our last 2 stitches. Insert the needle, wrap the yarn around the bottom needle, Bring that bottom needle from the back to the front, catching that loop right there. And now bring the needle and go into the back of the stitch as well, the same stitch. Wrap the needle around, bring that needle from the back to the front, once again catching that loop, and now you can push it off, okay? Okay, we have one more stitch left. Insert the needle into that stitch like we've done. Wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, bring that bottom needle from the back to the front, catching that loop. Go nice and slow if you're learning. Now take your needle and swing it around to the back of the stitch as well. Insert the needle, wrap the yarn around, bring that needle once again from the back to the front, picking up that loop and pushing it off, okay? We've just increased every stitch across, and if you want to double check yourself, we went from 5 to 10 stitches, so you can count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 stitches, okay? So that was row 1. So for row 2, what we're going to do is we're going to pass our needle from our left hand back to our right hand with the work on it. You kind of switch sides. And for this row, we're just going to purl, okay? Now, if you're not familiar with purling, that's okay. I'm going to show you how to do it as well. So what we want to do to purl, it's kind of the opposite of a knit stitch. Again, we're going to keep this tail out of the way, and we're going to come in and we're going to insert our needle into the top. We're going to go over top this time. So usually when you knit, you go into the stitch up underneath like that. But for our purl, we're going to go in from the top like that, okay? So go in from the top like I just showed you, and we're going to take our working yarn once again. We're going to wrap it around that top needle this time, and then you're going to go from the front to the back, picking up that stitch and push it off. We're not going to increase on this row as a side note. Okay, let's do a couple more purls together. Insert the needle, wrap it around, go from front to back, catching that loop, and push it off, okay? So purl every stitch on this row. So insert from the top and push it off. Next stitch. We're just working a purl in each stitch all the way across, okay? Just like that. And then we just have 2 stitches left, just purl those stitches as well, okay? So we just purled all those stitches. And now we're going to, once again, I like to kind of straighten everything out. We're going to switch hands. So pass your work from this side to this side. And then we're going to do basically the same thing we did for row 1, okay? So we did row 1 where we increase, we did row 2 where we purled each stitch, and now we're going to do row 3 where we're going to increase each stitch once again, okay? So what we're going to do is, once again, we're going to knit into the front and back of each stitch across, okay? So insert the needle. We're going to go through this one a little quicker because we just did this on row 1. Insert the needle. Grab your working yarn, wrap the yarn around the needle, bring it from the back to the front, picking up that loop, swing around to the back of the stitch, insert the needle into that stitch, wrap the yarn around the needle again, bring the needle from the back to the front, picking up that loop. We just turned 1 stitch into 2 stitches, okay? So I'm going to zip through this part because we've done this already. So we had 10 stitches. We're going to go to 20 stitches, okay? All right, so I'm just knitting into the front and the back of each stitch. And then we just have 2 stitches left here. And here's our last one, just like that, okay? All right, so for row 4, we can straighten everything out if we need to. This isn't going to be very tall. It's going to kind of make a coil, okay? So we're going to pass it to our other hand. And for row 4, we're going to just purl across like we did before. So remember, insert your needle into the top this time. And we're just going to purl our way across, okay? So just purl, purl, purl all the way across. Okay, coming up to the end of row 4, just purling that last stitch. And now for our final row, row 5, what we're going to do for that row, and again, you can straighten everything out here, is we're going to once again knit into the front and back of each stitch, okay? So I'm going to get you started here, and we've done a few rows of this now. You can kind of do it on your own, okay? So once again, we're going to knit into the front of the stitch, knit into the back of the stitch. All right, coming up to the end of the row here, I'm on that last knit front and back. And now we are ready to bind off. So as you can see, it really does not look like much. It just looks like a very wide U shape right now. So it's okay. It doesn't look like much, but it will soon. So the next thing we need to do is once again, swap it over to your next hand, your other hand rather, and we're gonna bind off. Now binding off is super easy. If you're not familiar, all you need to do to bind off is to insert your needle and just knit the stitch to start. So insert your needle as if to knit, wrap the needle around the bottom needle, bring the back to the front, picking up that loop and push it off just as a refresher. Knit the next stitch, same way. Now you'll have 2 stitches on your right needle. You're going to take your left needle and you're going to take your needle and go into that stitch closest to you, lift it up, over, and off of the needle. So we just did a bind off of 1 stitch. Knit the next stitch on your left side here. And then once again, take your needle, lift it up, over, and off. Some people find that it's easier to take your finger and just lift it off. You can do that if you prefer. Knit the next stitch, and you're just going to do this all the way across. So take your stitch closest to you, lift it up, over, and off. Knit the next stitch. And you're just going to do this all the way across. As you bind off, you'll start to see some of the curling that we've been talking about, okay? So just do this all the way across, and when we get towards the end of the row, I'll show you the next step. Okay, just binding off that very last stitch. And you'll have 1 loop left on your needle, okay? So you can put your other needle aside for now, and I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit because we're gonna assemble this now. All right, so what you wanna do is you wanna leave yourself a little bit of a tail and cut some yarn, and then loosen up that loop and take that end and send it through. And we're gonna kind of fasten it off, okay? So as you can see, we have kind of like a curlicue now, okay? So this is the back. See how it's the back of those knit stitches we did? This was the purl side. So we want to flip it over. You're going to look for those V's. That's going to be the front of your flower, okay? So then all you want to do is grab your tapestry needle, and we're going to coil our rows. It doesn't look like much right now, but this longer end, we're going to coil towards that, okay? So take the end that doesn't have the end, and you're just going to make a coil. We're not going to worry about this tail right now. And we're just going to wind it in, okay? So now we have a pretty little rose, okay? But it's not held together, so we need to sew it together. So take your tail, and we're just going to thread it onto our needle. And this part is kind of important because you don't want to over seam it because it'll flatten out your rose, and you don't want to under seam it because it'll flop around and not be held together very nicely. So we want to go to the back of our flower, and we want to go in with our needle and just go in a little bit into those back loops just to get it in a better spot. We don't want that point to stick out, okay? So you're just going to it'll kind of pull that point in. So coil up your rose if you need to again. And we're going to kind of not let this stick out. We're going to kind of tuck it in there, okay? So what we're going to do is take your needle, and we're going to come in picking up that corner that we started with, and we're going to come up under our flower and then go back down, okay? And then see this middle coil part? We need to tack that down. So figure out where you would like it to go, and then take your needle and just sort of like tack it down in the center there, okay? Okay, and then you'll just do a few more stitches just to get it tacked down. Again, don't over stitch it because it will sort of flatten out on you, okay? So just go Come up from the back and go back down a few times. And you might want to see how I'm sort of like opening it up to just kind of test it. We don't want anything loose and floppy on there, okay? All right, so come up from the back and go back down. Now we're gonna I try to like to end up in the middle here because it will kind of pull things in a little. See how it gives it that like a little more 3D look? And then flip it over. And then you're gonna take that other tail and you're going to tie it together. Now at this point, it depends on what you want to use your rose for. If you want to sew it to something, you'll want to weave these ends in. If you are going to put it, you could put it on a pipe cleaner and make a stem, or you could stick it to something, but you can either weave in these ends, or if you're going to sew it to something, you could just sort of like trim them off, okay? And our little rose is complete. Try this pattern with other yarns because it looks pretty in different yarns. You could try red, hot pink, and other things, but it's a very simple little rose. I hope you enjoyed this project as much as me, and be sure and hit that subscribe button to get all the latest updates for Sparkle and Splatter. Thanks, everyone!